difficult decisions are coming. He's ruled out plenty of other taxes, but he won't, he can't, he will not rule out the death tax. It's a tax that the public has rejected, not once, not twice, but 4 separate times. Yet still Andy Burnham seems to return to it. Why? Not just because he wants to change social care, no. If that was his sole aim, there are other ways to fund it, like cutting foreign aid or benefits for migrants. No. He's shown again and again that he thinks the savings that you've earned.
Originals, I'm Emily Carver. Please do give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And do leave a comment. Let me know what you think.
No matter how little that you've scrimped and saved for, that you've been taxed on, whether you're rich or poor, he says the taxman deserves a bit more. No one doubts that Andy Burnham possesses more charm than Keir Starmer. I know that's a low bar. But have we stopped to ask, what is he actually selling? On the big questions so far, there's a bunch of false promises and fantasy ideas that he can fix social care and worry about the costs another time, or that he can grow the economy in every postcode for British people, but water down immigration reforms to let in some more cheap migrant workers. And finally, that 700 people can cross the channel in small boats yesterday, tens of thousands this year, and that means his government's plan is actually working. He's like Labour's answer to the Pied Piper. He's playing an enticing tune, but actually leading them and our country into more desperate trouble. I'm not surprised that Nigel Farage was the only party leader that Andy Burnham wouldn't invite to discuss his idea. Despite the fact that reform provides £8 billion of social care through the 30 councils that we run. Because Andy Burnham knows, rightly to be fair, that Nigel will never go along with a betrayal of people who've paid in their whole lives. And make no mistake, that is what Andy Burnham is planning to do. That is the purpose of the talks that the other parties are now engaged in. Andy Burnham says that difficult decisions lie ahead. But let's be honest, that is Westminster politicians speak for tax rises lie ahead. Why not just be straight with people? Going after hard-working Brits on modest salaries with only a little in savings is the exact opposite of what reform stands for. We stand for protecting British workers and putting them first.
The cruel death tax trait exposed. How Westminster plans to raid your life savings. Welcome back to Britain Underneath, where we uncover the raw mechanics of power operating just below the surface of British political life. Before we jump into the heart of this storm, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support keeps this channel independent, vigilant, and dedicated to delivering the unvarnished truth behind the headlines. Now, let us dive straight into the growing storm over Westminster's latest economic gamble.
And as people begin to consider what this means for them and their family, many will understandably be very worried. Why can't he be straight with them? Why can't he just say what he is actually planning to do? Why cause them all this uncertainty and worry? Let me tell you how a universal death tax would actually work. Why this is a cruel and punitive tax. Today, whatever its faults, and clearly inheritance tax has many, it at least has a threshold. So that means that if you saved a little over the years, hundreds of pounds, a few £1,000s, or indeed a larger amount, up to £325,000 as an individual, you can pass that on to your family. Andy Burnham's levy is different. It has no threshold. No allowance, no minimum limit whatsoever. Everything goes in. The family heirlooms, your mother's wedding ring, if you've got a watch to hand on, and nothing else, it's taxed. A couple of pieces of jewelry, taxed. Even clothes, taxed. Think what that means. Think what that means for the least well-off families in this country. An estate of a few £100s in a post office account. A bit of furniture, the sofa, the telly, a small policy would somehow have to be catalogued, valued, and assessed. By who? Solicitors? Probate valuers? Officials? What, people charging fees for the smallest estates? The cost of the assessment alone might swallow the inheritance in whole. The state would spend £500 to take £300. Grieving families would undoubtedly be dragged through months of paperwork for the privilege of being left with next to nothing. And remember, this is the important point. Brits are already amongst the most heavily taxed people on earth when we die. Of the 38 OECD nations, Britain already runs the 5th harshest death tax regime. Nearly half of those countries don't tax children's inheritance at all, and rightly so. Australia scrapped death duties. Canada scrapped them. Even Sweden scrapped them because they raised very little, because they were despised, because they destroyed a lot. And Andy Burnham looks at all that. He looks at all of that and concludes, you know what? Britain doesn't tax death enough. To raise the £18 billion he needs for his plans, this tax would need to sit on top of the inheritance tax levied on the rich. That means together, Burnham's death tax and our existing inheritance tax would cost families almost £30 billion a year. Britain would become the single worst place to give money to your kids in the Western world. And it would be worse than that, because it would also make the UK the only country in the whole of the West to tax all savings with no allowance whatsoever. This is a truly extreme proposal. Is this the Makerfield test that we were promised by Andy Burnham when he was out on the stump? Well, take a nurse. Take a nurse in Makerfield who's worked her whole life in the NHS. She passes away. Maybe she passes away far too young, only a few years after retiring. She owns a house in Makerfield worth £200,000. She's not rich, but she worked hard and she saved for that home. She gets a lump sum of £100,000 on death from the NHS pension scheme. Under the current rules, none of that would be taxed.
The political class in London is once again eyeing the wealth of ordinary citizens. Behind closed doors, discussions have resurfaced surrounding a universal social care levy, a measure colloquially branded as a death tax. On paper, ministers frame this proposal as a necessary sacrifice to mend a crumbling social care system. But when you strip away the polished rhetoric, the underlying reality reveals something far more troubling for everyday families across the nation. Unlike conventional inheritance tax, which grants individuals a statutory threshold before taking a slice of an estate, this proposed levy threatens to apply from the very first pound. That means modest family homes, small post office savings accounts, and even cherished family heirlooms could fall directly into the tax collector's net. For decades, hardworking Britons have scrimped and saved with the simple hope of leaving something behind for their children. Yet the system seems determined to penalize that lifetime of prudence.
And I think we can all agree Quite right so. But under Andy Burnham's death tax, her children would have to pay £30,000 to the taxman, plus the form filling, the worry, the things they'd have to do when they should be grieving for their lost mother. I sometimes wonder if people in the political and media establishment think people are swimming in money out there in the real world. Most people don't inherit very much money at all. And the poorest in society inherit very small sums. But it makes a very big difference to their lives, particularly at times like this, where people are finding life tough. In fact, when the poorest 20% get an inheritance, it makes up 44% of their wealth. Are you going to tax that and make their family account for it to HMRC? And who would actually pay for it? It's not going to be the rich. The rich have family offices. They have offshore structures. They have accountants on retainers. They will have planned their way around this levy long before the bill has even reached its first reading in Parliament. We all know that. We've seen this before.
Consider what this means for a mid-tier worker, a nurse, a teacher, or a skilled tradesperson who has spent 40 years paying off a modest mortgage. Under current arrangements, their modest estate passes to their grieving family largely intact. Under a universal levy without thresholds, that same family could face tens of thousands of pounds in fresh tax liabilities, accompanied by months of bureaucratic stress during an already agonizing period of grief. The administrative burden alone risks swallowing smaller estates before a single penny reaches the intended heirs. While you digest the scale of this proposal, take a quick breath and pause for a second. If you value deep, uncompromising analysis of the policies shaping your financial future, please consider subscribing to Britain Underneath right now. It takes just a second, but it tremendously helps this channel grow, enabling us to continue producing the sharp political breakdowns you rely on.
A flat tax with no floor doesn't catch the millionaires or the billionaires. It catches the widow in the bungalow. It catches the elderly pensioner with the savings book. The Duke keeps his estate, the dinner lady loses hers. It's always the same way. The clever money moves, the honest money pays. And think finally of the sheer indignity of it all. An official standing in your late mother's bedroom with a clipboard, pricing up her engagement ring, the brooch that you'd always admired and she said would be yours, that you'd carry to remember her. The taxman totting up her coats in her wardrobe, itemizing a life that's been characterized by work, thrift, prudence, love of family, so that the treasury can take its cut. And then what of all the unanswered questions? Will farmers be exempted? Or will they face yet another attack? What of family businesses? We're surely not going to repeat all the angst for them that Rachel Reeves created last year. 2026 will be marked by protests of tractors on Whitehall, just as 2024 and 2025 were. Will husbands and wives have to pay when the other dies? They did under Andy Burnham's white paper. People are worried now, and they can't wait a year for an answer. Now, others will ask, how else do we pay for care? Because we all see the flaws of the present system. Nobody denies that. Nobody's blind to the problems. Nobody who's watched a parent pass through it could deny it. I have, as an MP, as a grandson, and more recently as a son. I don't doubt the Prime Minister's sincerity either. The system needs to change. but not necessarily the change that he's looking at.
Critics rightly point out the glaring imbalance in this approach. Wealthier individuals with access to complex legal structures and offshore financial planning will invariably navigate around such measures long before any legislation receives royal assent. The burden, as always, falls squarely upon the middle and lower earners, those whose assets are transparent, fixed, and impossible to hide from HM revenue and customs. Furthermore, the fundamental assertion that Britain lacks the funds for social care without hitting deceased taxpayers is open to serious challenge. Billions of pounds are currently absorbed by administrative bloat, redundant quongos, foreign aid commitments to economically robust nations, and massive inefficiencies within the public sector. Streamlining basic operations, such as replacing archaic paper systems that still hinder seamless patient transfers between hospitals and care homes, could free up substantial resources without levying a fourth layer of taxation on citizens' earnings. The care sector undoubtedly requires urgent attention, and the workers who dedicate their lives to looking after our vulnerable elderly population deserve proper wages and deep respect. However, attempting to finance these reforms by raiding the modest inheritances of working families represents a profound misdirection of priority. It reflects a political establishment that treats the home as a convenient revenue stream, rather than the foundation of family security.
For a prime minister who's claimed that he cares about localism, it is striking that his first big policy is not to devolve, but to build a national bureaucracy that takes power from local councils. Care in Haringey will always be different to care in Herefordshire, and rightly so. He's going to create another office full of bureaucrats deciding who gets what. The government is currently trying and failing to abolish NHS England, a giant overbearing quango. And what? We're going to create another one for NHS care? I'm not at all convinced that this will help anyone to get better quality care, and that is what we should care about. I also want to ensure that we end the evident profiteering from the system. Large private equity-backed care home companies extracting money, sometimes fleecing families and local councils. I've spoken this week to reform-controlled councils who've told me about a care company hiking.
As we navigate these uncertain political times, staying informed is your strongest defense against quiet policy shifts. We strongly encourage you to stay tuned to every detail of this breakdown right until the very last word, because understanding these maneuvers is essential to protecting your family's future. The fundamental conflict at the heart of this debate comes down to respect for the public. Time and again, voters have expressed clear opposition to blanket inheritance levies. Yet, Westminster routinely repackages the same concept under fresh terminology, hoping the public will fail to notice the underlying mechanics. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us today. If this perspective brought clarity to a complex debate, please hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts in the comments, and share this video with friends who care about the future of our country. Your ongoing backing is the lifeblood of Britain Underneath, allowing us to keep investigating the political moves that affect your everyday life. Stay informed, take care, and make sure to return for our next deep dive into what is really happening across the United Kingdom.